Welcome everybody, happy Super Bowl day. Today in this video I'm going to be showing you how to configure a Juniper switch for 802.1x and it associate with ISE. So what I did here in my lab is I have a Juniper switch, an EX4200, that's connected to my little home network, which is connecting to my ISE server. Everything in between my Juniper switch and my server, it's working, it's irrelevant at the moment. So right now I'm talking about the endpoint, the network access device, which is the Juniper EX4200 switch, and then the ISE configuration. So what I did to configure this was I actually just Googled it, and I just put how to configure Juniper ISE with 802.1x, and there was this PDF here. It says Juniper with ISE 2.0 plus configuration, and I basically followed this format right here. Okay. Now the only difference between this and my lab is I'm actually running 15.1R9, I believe. What am I running here? Nope, R7.9. All right. So this is relatively similar, and I just followed this, and these are the ISE specific and DOT1x commands that you need to apply to your Juniper switch. So I'll take you through these commands and I'll show you my actual configuration, and then I'll show you my ISE policies, because he tells you, since Juniper is a third-party device and isn't Cisco, and it doesn't natively interact with Cisco ISE, you actually have to install a device profile. All right, so I'll take you through that. But first, let's go through the Juniper commands. So I already have all this configured because I tested, and clearly you can see it's working. But what I want to do is a show configuration, and then show you basically these commands right here. And I'll take you step by step. So this right here is saying this interface, the G000 interface, it is going to be part of the internal VLAN, and then the VoIP option, if there were to be a VoIP on this switch port, which I don't have one, but if it were, then it's going to be part of the voice VLAN, whatever I determine that is. Now, if I do a show VLAN brief, I have, these are all my VLANs that I've created. Okay? So that takes care of that. Now these commands, all these set commands, these are specific for 802.1x. Okay, and as you can tell here, all of these commands are applied to the interface for .1x specific capabilities. This first one is you creating a .1x authentication profile, and that's all that's doing. And basically all these commands right here, all these interface commands are going to be applied underneath your 802.1x authentication protocol. And if I go back to my switch, show configuration, and I scroll all the way down, there you go. You see how it says set protocols .1x authenticator authentication profile? That is exactly what is happening here. I go under protocols, I select .1x, and then I go to authenticator. Then underneath that submenu, I create an authentication profile called .1x auth. Slightly different from this one, but I wanted to use all caps and say .1x instead of 802.1x. Then you go into the interface where you want to apply DOT1x commands. And as you can see here, I've done that. Supplicant multiple, retries 3, quiet period 300, so on and so forth. You could tune these timers to what you want to. So here, instead of reauthentication for 1 hour, I changed it to 30 seconds just because I wanted to reauthenticate and look at ICE every 30 seconds, so on and so forth. So just go ahead and follow that document, and this will give you a basic configuration and understanding of 802.1x. What's next? Defining the radius server. Okay, so if you are in the main configuration root menu, you can apply these commands, set access radius server, so on and so forth, or you can drill down and say edit access radius server, hit enter, and then enter the IP address of your radius server, and then all the specific commands that apply to that radius server itself. So this right here is my ICE server, which is 21.13. Give it the secret shared key, which you have to define in ICE, and I'll show you that. And then what is the timeout parameters for this radius server? How many times will I retry it? And then what will I source all these packets from? And then that takes you through that, basically. This right here is the default. So that's why you kind of don't see it here, because it is the default and it won't apply it. Next, we will go to the set access profile radius server, which is right here. So if I scroll up, you will see access profile .1x auth. So that's a little bit different than what this says, but again, like I said before, that's the profile I wanted to create. And then all the specific commands underneath that. Authentication order, I want it to be radius. And then under radius, what are the authentication and accounting servers? This is my ICE. Okay? And then these commands right here were just to create the specific VLANs. You didn't have to do that unless it was already there. But again, here are all my VLANs that I have created. Okay? Now, I'm not going to go through all the Juniper commands. I'm not going to show you the submenus of everything. But if you configure all of these commands, then it should work. Okay? From the switch's perspective. Now we have to go into ICE, and how do we configure ICE? Well, this document says you have to import a network device profile because Juniper is not a native party for Cisco. So what you have to do is you have to download the profile, and it says you can find it here. When you click this, it'll take you to this page. Scroll all the way down, and then under Juniper Wired, I want you to right-click, open a new tab. And then you download this zip file. Okay? Now once you unzip it, well, sure, I'll just do that. I already did this before, but I'll show you right now. Go ahead and extract it. And let's put it under, sure, you can put it underneath downloads. Sure. Okay. Now that I unzipped it and we have this Juniper _ wild XML, let's go back to the configuration, and it says to import the network device profile in ICE, you must navigate to administration network, resources, network device profiles, and click import. Okay. Administration, network devices. Network devices group? Nope. What did it say? Network resources, network device profiles. Network device profiles. There you go. Okay. Now, if this was not here, what you would do is you would click Import, choose File, and then choose that directory right there. Go ahead and click Open, and then it would import, and then it would be right here. All right. So now we have the network device profile for Juniper. Okay. Now, next after that, I don't think the configuration tells you to add the NAD. Oh, yes, it does. Okay. So now that we added the network device profile, what we are going to do is going to add the NAD device, or the NAD, into ISE so it is allowed to talk to ISE. So what we do is we go to network device. I already have it here, but what you would do is you would click Add, give it a name, Juniper new, no spaces, new switch, give it a description, blah, and then what is the IP address? 192.168.5. Let's say 6. Sure. And then this is where you apply the network device profile that you just imported. Go ahead and click Juniper wired. You can click model name and version, but it doesn't know anything about it, so just go ahead and leave it alone. And then you use the radius section here, and then put in the shared secret that you actually define on either ISE itself or on the switch. Okay? And you can see that in the radius secret encrypted section right there. So whatever that means, in plain text, you would put that right in here. So it could be, test 1, 2, 3. All right. And then you would hit submit, and then now that Juniper switch is allowed to talk to Cisco ISE. So on my example, that is the IP address of my switch. The device profile is Juniper. The shared secret is CCNP Seth, because that's my lab. And that is actually the shared secret right here. That is CCNP Seth right there. Okay? All right. Moving on. Go ahead and hit save, and then everything should be good to go from network devices perspective. So now what we have to do is actually be specific with the policies now that Juniper is talking to ISE. There's a couple ways that you can do this. You can set up MAB and 802.1x with 2 different profiles. And that's what I did in my testing. And one thing I want to point out here is MAB, the way that Juniper implements it is a little bit different than how Cisco devices do. So you can't just use the wired MAB default configuration that ISE has. You have to create a particular policy for Juniper. And I would suggest that as well, just so you can separate, okay, this is a Cisco profile, this is a Juniper profile. So it says here the Juniper MAB policy is matching NAS port type Ethernet, and then the service type is going to be call check. Then it also says it is also requiring that the MAB authentication EAP type is EAP MD5, which we set earlier in our configs. And then the rule is pointing to internal endpoints. The Juniper 802.1x policy is only looking for NAS port type from radius. However, I am specifying, oh no, that's for 802.1x. What I wanted to point out here is Okay, no, that's fine. Okay, so how do we actually create this part right here? All right, and then you can also see the picture here. You can try to follow what the policy is saying, but I'll walk you through it in my configuration. Okay. So I created a separate policy set for Juniper, and I said Juniper test. And then underneath here, for the very top piece, to say whatever meets these conditions, it is going to run this policy set versus anything else. And what I did here is the condition is the condition called Juniper, which I created, and that means that the network device profile equals Juniper underscore wired. Okay, how did I create that? It's a good question. Let's go to policy conditions, compound conditions. I created this, so you can click add, but I created this called Juniper, and I said, that's the description, and I said the condition is if the expression device network device profile equals, and then type in what it actually is. You have to be very specific, so I said Juniper underscore wired. I'm not sure if it was, I think it was capitalized. Capitalized, Juniper underscore wired, and then go ahead and hit save. I'm not going to hit save. I want to see exactly what it was. Juniper underscore wired, yes. So this has to match what you have under network device profiles, which is that right there. All right, that has to match. Okay, go back to policy sets. So that's where that condition is. So anything that is coming from a Juniper device, it is going to hit this policy set. Now for the authentication policy. I created one. All I have to do is hit insert new row above or duplicate, or it doesn't really matter. But I named it Juniper MAB. And I said if the radius NAS port type equals Ethernet, and it equals call check, and it equals EAP MD5, allow these protocols, which is the default network access, which means how many different types and what different types of authentication protocols are allowed, then bump it against the internal endpoints called MAB, which I created. Okay? And that is for Juniper MAB. The way that you create this, I'll go back in and I'll click the plus button, and you have to create these conditions. So what you do here is go to each little description or each little part of the condition and follow that example that I just said. It's going to start with radius and then the NAS port type. So find radius. Find the NAS port type, which is, yeah, it has to be specific, okay? NAS port type, which is 61, equals, and then it has to equal Ethernet, all right? Where did I get all this information from? I got it from the document, well, right here, but also it's in the text right here, okay? Okay. Now, let's go back. I'll hit done. Let me cancel this. Reset. Are you sure you want to reset? You will lose. Yes. Okay. So that's fine. Now, this internal endpoints for MAB. This is where you actually have to put in the MAC address of the device that you're trying to authenticate via MAB if you don't have an external identity source. Okay? I don't have an Active Directory domain where I have MAC addresses, nor do I have an LDAP database. But what I do have is an internal database, and that's where I added the MAC address for a specific computer. And you go to administration, and then you go to identity management and go to identities. It'll take you here. Actually, go to groups. And this is where you have endpoint identity groups. Okay. And then this is where you would specifically add the MAC address of the workstation. So I created this called MAB, and it has the MAC address of a specific computer. I also added it in a couple other places like workstation. Actually, no, I didn't add it there. I took that out. I think I added it one more place. Maybe a Juniper device. Nope, that's not it either. Must have been just right here, under MAB. I created this. You can click Add, and then add a new thing, and just go ahead and start adding MAC addresses. So that's the internal database for MAB. But how I aggregated that together so I can get I'll show you how I got this right here, internal endpoints underscore MAB. I actually have to aggregate that and create my own identity source sequence. So by default, all of these except internal endpoints underscore MAB is there by default. And if you want to use that internal endpoint store, then you have to add it to one of these default profiles, or you can create your own. I created my own, and I called it internal endpoints MAB. And then it allows you to choose what authentication stores are available. And one of them is called internal endpoints, which is everything under identity management groups. Okay? So now I created an actual identity source sequence. Then I applied it to the policy, which is stated right there. Now this is for Juniper MAB. For Juniper 802.1x, the configurations are still the same on the switch. I just have to create the authentication policy. And I said, I named it Juniper 802.1x, and if a radius NAS port type comes in and it equals Ethernet, and the EAP authentication equals EAP MSCHAP v2, then make sure that those are the profiles allowed, or I'm sorry, the authentication access protocols. And then I will bump it up against the all user identity store. Okay. Again, that was that default profile that I showed you, and it holds a whole bunch of username and passwords and so on and so forth. So in my 802.1x example, I actually have Ubuntu, and it is using MSCHAP v2 with a username and password, which is defined on ISE. Okay. If I go back here, go to Edit Network Connections, go to Wired, go to Edit, 802.1x, and then you see here MSCHAP v2. The username is DOT1x underscore user2, and then a specific password. That is how I'm authenticating this Ubuntu machine with 802.1x. Where is this username stored? That's a good question. Go to Administration, go to Identities, go to Users, and then there is that user, okay? User2. And then that's the username, that's the password, and then you could put it in whatever group that you want to. It doesn't really matter, as long as it's there. Okay, a lot going on, but I want to make sure that I document this so everyone can see exactly all the little specifics that you have to do for this to work. Okay, now, all I wanted to do was get authentication working. If authentication worked, then that means that the authorization policy would be executed. All I wanted to make sure was if authentication worked, then the authorization is just permit access. I just wanted to test that. So what I said here for my authorization policy is if you were authenticated, then go ahead and permit access. That's all I said. The configuration on that document that I used to follow showed you how to use authorization profiles, but I'm not going to get into that. Maybe I'll do that in another video. I'm pretty sure it's going to work since 802.1x authentication worked. I'm sure authorization is the same exact thing. Okay? And then the way that you verify is you go into Cisco ISE and then show the operations section, go into Radius Live Logs, and then you'll see the device authenticating. And then on the switch, what you want to do is use the show DOT1x interface G whatever interface, hit details. And that's what I did when I first started this video. I did show DOT1x interface GE0000.0 details, and then you get to see everything that's happening. But if you don't want to see the details, just go ahead and hit enter, and then you can see for this interface the state is authenticated, there's the MAC address, and there's the user of 802.1x. Okay? And if we go on ISE and we go to live logs, you can see that this device is being authenticated via, well, if I open it up, it'll show me. It should show me the IP address of that device. I don't see it. Okay. Well, to prove that it is actually working, let's go into Ubuntu. Let me unplug. I got the switch right near me. Let me unplug the interface and then watch this go down. And actually, I can do this. Ping 8.8.8.8. All right, let that go on forever. I'm going to unplug and then replug the port in, and then we should see it stop. And then reconnect, and we should see another reconnection in ISE. All right, I just unplugged. I just replugged it in. As you can tell, okay, now the pings came back. If we go to ISE, it keeps re-authenticating. I mean, I guess that wasn't a big thing. Yeah. So, but anyways, so that's it. Definitely Google 802.1x Juniper ISE 802.1x, and then it is going to be this Juniper with ISE 2.0 plus configuration. It's PDF. And then follow this and do it in your testing, do it in your labs, and get it to work. That's what I did, and I'm actually glad I did it because I have a better understanding on how Juniper works and how everything works. So that's it. So I hope this was informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.